Okay. Hey, Leah.
Hey, hey, Katie.
Welcome back to Emerging Proud. It's so good to be with you again.
Thank you. It's great to be with you. I can't believe it's been 7 years since our last conversation.
I know, it's crazy. We were just saying it's like, oh, 7 year cycle and like we're new people and it's so true. But yeah, I just want to give a nod to Nchem and Defo because it's due to her that we kind of reconnected. And I was so blessed to be having a conversation with her a few weeks ago, and she mentioned, like, we were talking about abolitionism and liberation and peer movements, and she mentioned your name, and I was like, I know Leia, she was in my film. And it's like, yeah, we need to reconnect. So yeah, you are one of the first to come back for Merging Proud 2.0, so I'm so grateful to have.
Thank you. Yeah, big love to NChem for bringing us together and for everything that NChem does in the world. Yes.
Incredible woman, incredible woman. So yeah, and talking of incredible women, I was like, when I heard what you were up to now, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, yeah, we really need to get you back on and hear all about this because it's super exciting. And I think, I the idea of revisiting people and their stories that took part in the original Emerging Proud campaign is to support people who may be on that journey themselves now and kind of hear from you what helped you get from where you were to where you are now doing this incredible work in the world, which I'll ask you about in a moment. But I know you've been in the survivor activist movement for what, like 20 years, 25 years maybe now. And
Yeah, getting up there. Yeah, it was 2000 that I got connected. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so you've done so much, and I know I felt really privileged to have you on 7 years ago. And so, you've done so much more. I know since then you are, a poet and activist, story writer, and but you're now kind of, I know, founding a new project. So I don't know if I hand over to you to just let people know what you're up to in the world now, because you can do it more credit than I can. So I want to learn as we talk along with everyone else.
Thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, and I would say that, over time, I've changed the nature of what I do. I've changed perspectives about a lot of things, but the common thread that ties my work together is really around liberation and seeing that all liberation struggles are connected. So I very much work out of that paradigm. And one of the tools that I use is writing in the written word. So I'm a journalist, I'm a creative writer, and a lot of my reporting has focused on human rights, innovative projects that are run by survivors, efforts to preserve and defend our rights, which in the United States are very much under attack. And then, on the other side is kind of the more creative work, but it's still very much tied to that liberation piece. So I'm working on a memoir that is very much in the service of psychiatric abolition. We could talk a little bit more about that, but I'm in the midst of that work, shaping it, thinking about the structure. And then, yeah, I'm also starting this Menopause Solidarity network, which I'm so freaking excited about. And it's really just because I got completely taken off guard when I was beginning to go through that transition, which I think was probably a little after we talked. So menopause was not on my radar. I thought, oh, that's going to happen in my 50s or 60s, had no idea what was coming. So this project is really born out of what I wish had existed when I was going through some really, really tough and intense times that did have a hormonal component. And I want to create what I wish had existed and which I was able to sort of cobble together. But I want to make that process so much easier for folks. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I'm up to these days.
Amazing. And I know when we reconnected, that was kind of, I was so excited about that because I'm there now too. And it's like, oh, this is so needed. A new narrative around what it means, to be perimenopausal, menopausal as a woman in a Western, capitalist culture that doesn't allow the freedom and yeah, the sense actually to just be in connection with our bodies and allow those processes to happen. So yeah, thank you for doing that work. It's so needed. Before we, I mean, there's so much I want to dive into about what you're doing, but before we do, can we just, if we just rewind slightly, just to, and I will pop link your story from your original sharing into this video when I share it with people, but just a little synopsis about kind of where you came from and why you're doing, because I think something you said there, Leah, was you cobbled things together because of what you'd been through. And I think that's, I remember you saying in your original interview about feeling like it was almost like your soul had chosen to live the life that of trauma and struggle because it was your mission. And I know so many people I've spoken to feel that way. And so you were born to parents who were both in a psychiatric institution, right? And I remember you saying you were conceived in a mental hospital. I
I
really
mean, I don't know if I was conceived in the mental hospital, but my parents met in the mental hospital. I mean, you never know, but yeah, yeah.
I
I
thought I
definitely,
remembered that from your interview because it's one of those things that stick in your mind.
yeah, it's a little murky. Yeah, but they definitely connected there, however they connected. And so yeah, I come by this work very honestly.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. So I guess, yeah, the main question and the thread that I'd love to weave through what we speak about is your journey from the impact that that had on you as a child born to parents who had e experienced that oppression, um, the impact that had on you and how you've kind of harnessed what you do now and what you've used to liberate yourself along the way, because I know you got embroiled in the psychiatric labels as well as a response for your own experiences. And yeah, so I don't want to kind of go back too much and stay too long on that, but just a little synopsis of kind of where you started on this survivor journey, I think would be really helpful to revisit if that's okay for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I was born to two parents who were, diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar as young adults, and as a result, kind of grew up in or alongside these interlocking systems of oppression. So it's, the criminal and justice system, the psychiatric system, the child welfare system, kind of how these all hang out together in these very oppressive, controlling kinds of ways. And I saw the impacts that had on my family. Obviously, it had on me. I was removed from the home at 5. So, that family separation very much is a part of my story, and the traumatic impact of that reverberates over a lifetime. And then, yeah, I spent my whole adolescence essentially in and out of various facilities, for expressing rage, feelings that, that were unacceptable, saying things that were unacceptable, kind of being that person that became the identified patient. And I saw what had happened to my parents, and I was like, I cannot let that be my fate. Whatever it takes, that's not going to be my fate. And even though it was all sort of, I was given a lot of lies about genetic determinism and things like that, that I had more than a 50% chance of, ending up in the system in that way. And I just put it all behind me. I threw myself into academics. Like, that was a way that I could get approval from the world, which I needed so desperately after being a patient for so long. And I could get validation for how hard I worked and how hard I performed, and that kind of got me through for a little while until it didn't.
Yeah.
Because one's past, that past was still living in me. I couldn't put it behind me because it was still alive, and continues to live in me. And so that, set about kind of a process of searching and trying to understand, and a lot of cool like synchronicities happened that led me to the psychiatric survivor movement when I was just, 25 years old, and just like blew my whole world open, like busted all the paradigms that I had been raised with. And I was like, just all in, I'm going to be a part of like fighting these systems, dismantling these systems, and join this generational struggle. So
Mm.
that's kind of a thumbnail of how I came to the struggle.
Thank you. And thank God you did land there because yeah, the movement needs needs your voice as well, and we were saying actually before we started to record, it feels like there's a massive ripple effect going on now because our webs are interconnecting and more people are connecting with each other, and it's like, oh yeah, the names that we know that this was quite a small network only, a decade ago, and now it's like suddenly feels like it's gone boof because there's more information about trauma informed, approaches and how the myth of like you said, genetics and the chemical imbalance and all of that, there's so much evidence now that it's just not true. So people are searching for another narrative. And so it's work like yours that, can support that. And I think that's what I'm hoping that these new interviews can offer to people is, okay, so if you're disreg if you're choosing to step out of the psychiatric labeling that maybe have been given to you, what's the alternative? Like where can we go? Like where can we find an alternative and the people that can support that? So yeah, it would be great to maybe weave our way from where you were when you started then to like what have you found, Leah, that's supported your journey to now to liberation and being this incredible like authentic version of yourself, where you say it still lives, the trauma that it still lives in us, it doesn't disappear, but it's like alchemized and used in a different way, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to speak to there.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say first of all, it was from my peers that I even learned about trauma, like what it was and how trauma impacts us in different ways over the course of our lifetime. Like I had never learned any of that. I mean,
Mm.
I would have been able to tell you in a very sort of basic way, but they were the ones who kind of supported me to kind of go deep with this knowledge and reframe my understanding of my own experience and how we talk, how we understand this thing called mental health, right? So it was the education that they taught me so much. And then I would also say, like, I would not be here if it wasn't for people who said, Leah, your voice is important. I was so ashamed of my history, and I was so terrified of, quote, coming out of the closet, right, as a psych survivor, as a suicide attempt survivor, all this stuff that people try to keep secret. I'm now, like, about to put this on the internet, where it will live forever. But it was them who, like, held me through that process of, like, I really do reckon it to a kind of coming out. It was that process of reckoning, and elevating, like amplifying my voice and telling me that my voice mattered because I'd heard the opposite my entire life. um and then yeah, just introducing me to these whole other paradigms, these ways of understanding how we can care for and with one another without force and coercion and all of these other tactics that I and my family had experienced. And so I just felt like my entire universe was blasted open when I came in contact with these folks. And I've now been in for about a generation, and I'm seeing like new people, have been rising up, and it's like my joy to be able to support young people in the way that I was when I was 25. So I really do view it as this like generational chain.
Mm.
Maybe chain isn't the best metaphor, but this this you know thread, this link that's woven through the generations as we fight for liberation, as we fight to dismantle harmful systems. So it really is like it's the power of the collective that propelled me onto this path and that continues to keep me here.
Amazing. Yeah, you just reminded me of a visual I had actually when I had my experience of this kind of a wheel of this uprising of like everyone in power falling and all of the grassroots kind of people rising and supporting each other, but in solidarity. Um, and yeah, isn't it ironic? It's like we all find the power in the peer, not the power in the professional, narrative. And just the irony of that, in terms of capitalism and payment and survival and everything it takes. But yeah, I really hear what you're saying around the new generations that are coming through, and it's like incredible young people now that I'm just learning so much from, um, with new, really evolved narratives actually around what it means to be human. And yeah, kind of these decolonized ideas around, which are kind of re emerging indigenous wisdoms as well, and I think you can probably speak to that too, Leah. But yeah, so, and I wanted to mention because you were talking about did you mention, I don't know if you mentioned about compliance or the system, that how you had to be when you were in the system yourself and the oppression and the shame that that caused. But I know your new book is called Noncompliant, right? I absolutely love that. I can't wait to read it. Did you want to let people know a little bit about that? When is it due out? Like, where are you at with it?
Yeah, I'm still working on the book proposal. There's a publisher that's interested, fingers crossed. So we'll see, it's still very much figuring out like the final form of what it wants to be. But really I got the idea to, first I was going to just write a memoir that was kind of your typical literary memoir. Here's the story of my family and I'm using craft to tell it. But I just kept feeling like that is not quite right. Because of everything that I said, that it's like I exist in my current form and I'm doing everything I'm doing because of a movement and because of these histories and these legacies that live in me. And so I really decided that I was going to shrink down the sort of literary memoir part of it, still going to be telling that story, mostly focusing on the my mother and myself and that
Mhm.
what happened to her, what happened to us.
Mhm.
Um but also like tracing the activism, tracing the history. I'm a huge history buff.
Mhm.
So our story took place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in the US. And I traveled there several times in the research,
Mhm.
and had a lot of really interesting kind of experiences doing that. But going back to the site of the old asylum that my mom was held at, that had been, since torn down, a new one built on
Mhm.
that same land. That one's been torn down. So I'm tracing like the history of these asylums and how what that says about kind of our hamster wheel of a system where like things change, but nothing really changes. And that I argue that the way to sort of get off that toxic cycle where it's just like new forms of the same old harm, the way, to my mind, is psychiatric abolition, right? Like moving past the idea that these systems can be fixed or
Mhm.
reformed, but that they must be utterly dismantled, and we have to create something. Well, I don't know about create something totally new, but build upon the innovation that is already existing and has been flourishing for decades. It's like we have this old world that's dying and this new world that's waiting to be born, and we're kind of like in that cusp
Yeah,
area. And it's
happening the world
yeah,
the right
yes,
way. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's basically what I'm trying to do with the book. It's very much a personal history, but it's also a political history, and those are I'm trying to weave them together in a way that hopefully makes sense and has an impact.
Amazing, amazing. Do you know, so you don't have a publication date for that yet?
Unfortunately not, but I'm hoping within the next year or two, it will be out in the world. Yeah,
Yeah,
fingers crossed.
look at that for you.
Thank you.
Sounds amazing and so needed, you know. I think we know there are so many memoirs out there, but yeah, the whole political piece is really key as well because I think, you know, what you were saying before about validating someone's voice actually is huge, isn't it? It's like it's really not rocket science. Some of what actually helps liberate someone is letting them know that, you know, then their voice matters and they've possibly been through what they've been through because they're part of this movement, you know, this kind of evolutionary shift. I know you and I both feel that way. Um, and it's not to put that narrative on someone else if they don't feel that, but I know a lot of us in this movement do feel that way. So I guess that's maybe also a survival mechanism, you know. I know it's helped me along the way to think, oh, you know, yeah, I went through what I went through for a reason because it's, you know, led me to do what I'm doing in the world. And whether it's true or not, it doesn't actually matter as long as it's helpful, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's really like this really interesting alchemical process of how we kind of show each other that to turn like the source, at least for me, like the source of my greatest shame
Mm.
became the source of my greatest power, right? And like, and I mean that not power over, but just, power within and power with. And it's like, right, how do we take that wound and it's not sort of papering over it or pretending it didn't happen, but being able to take the learnings and transmute that into being forces of nature.
I love that. I know Encam talks about ethical use of power, doesn't she? And it's like, yeah, that's our ethical power. As long as we are doing our own work as well at the same time, you know, and really aware of our own stuff. And I know, like, you've talked about how embodiment is such an important part of the process, and maybe that links to the work you're doing around the menopause. I know, you know, we've spoken about co-regulation, and that's something that comes up a lot, isn't it, in the peer movement, is how do we be together in the most helpful way? And in order to do that, we have to really be embodied, which the psychiatric system prevents, actually, you know? So,
Mm, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. By the very nature of it, sort of acting like our brains are not connected to the rest of our bodies and kind of creating this Cartesian split within how we understand ourselves and each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm probably sort of, yeah, moving too quickly here because I really want to find out about your menopause project.
Yes.
um, so yeah, just to go back to kind of your, I guess, the trajectory. So you found yourself in the survivor movement, you discovered that your voice had some power, you know, and rightly so. You know, you're an incredible writer, journalist. Um, and what else can you remember sort of from those years really helped you to transmute that shame and step out in such a huge, you know, public way as you do? Was there anything or anyone or any particular modalities that you used sort of to support that?
Yeah, I've worked in a lot of different ways over the years, and as much as I recognize the value of embodiment, I have also struggled with it. I I'm like a doer. I find myself kind of caught up in, a lot of doing, and sometimes I forget to just allow myself to exist as a human. But yeah, I mean, I think really what sustains me and what has sustained me over the years is, yes, my living comrades, my living peers who are in their bodies here on earth, but also really tapping into ancestral connection. And that was also a big part of the research of my book, was sort of researching my own family line, like looking back through genealogy and, just tracing a lot of that heritage and lineage that lives in me, but also the survivor lineage, right, that lives in me, activists who are no longer with us. I'm thinking of people like Darby Penny, so many luminaries. I mean, I have this board I wish I could show you, like maybe if I turn my computer around, but in front of me is just like, Florence Kennedy and Elder Malidoma Somé, and Darby is there, and Hannah Arendt, and my great grandfather and my dead astrologer. I mean, I have all of these images of people that I've either known or just people that I look to as spiritual mentors, um, that are there in front of me, and it's that ancestral connection and tapping into that and realizing, like, all I need to do is my little part in this little lifetime, like I don't need to have an overinflated or underinflated sense of importance about that, but it's like I'm doing my work, and I'm part of this chain of struggle and of liberation, and that really sustains me, I think, more than any like particular technique or modality. Like, different ones have served at different times. But I think the ancestor work has been the richest and most powerful and continues to unfold in extraordinary ways in my life. So yeah, yay ancestors. And I'll say, like, there's one category of ancestors that I call the mad cestors, the mad ancestors. I don't know if anybody else has used that term, but I couldn't find it. I was like, yeah,
Oh yours. Oh
it's
God.
if it's someone else's, I give them, whatever credit. But yeah, I really love my mad sisters and the strength and the humor that they bring to my life.
I love that. Love that. I really relate as well what you were saying to like your mother line, and I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Leah, but or what you found maybe from your delvings into history. But for me, I know my mother, her mother were definitely of this kind of lineage where they were tapped into, spirit, but it just wasn't safe to voice that. Or if they did, then, we know the repercussions, right? So yeah, I think, and that's where I guess going back to the mission thing is where Emerging Proud came from, because it's like, okay, well, my female lineage of ancestors were not allowed to speak out, so I'm going to create a platform that allows people to speak out about this stuff. And I know that I remember you saying that, you hid all of that side of yourself, but I think I remember you saying, as a child you were quite connected to that side of yourself. So yeah, and I know you've experienced a little more since we spoke as well, so I don't know if you want to touch on that a bit.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely feel that in my mother line. I mean, my mother was a hippie. And, still, yeah, there was the pathologizing that happened with her wanting to break with to just be a nonconformist, right? To just be her own person. Like, that was absolutely not okay. And I feel like I'm trying to continue the work that she never got to complete. She died at 46, few years younger than I am now. Um, and and yeah, and I've had such a complicated relationship with spirituality, what we call spirituality, which is such a loaded term, but as a child, yeah, I was such a seeker, I just I would pull books about Zen off my grandfather's bookshelf. I just was fascinated in different spiritual paths, including Judaism, which I was born into. Um, and yeah, and then I think, work in 12-step fellowships helped me understand how to sort of cultivate a direct connection, to kind of move beyond this idea that I need to be in a certain place, or there needs to be a certain kind of intermediary for me to have that experience. And meditation also taught me that. But the 12-step work, I think, was the deepest, in the sense of like, how do you actually cultivate that connection with
Mm,
spirit, that relationship on a daily basis, and cultivate that sense of trust,
mhm,
right, in the universe, for lack of a better word, but trust in that source.
mhm,
And it's been a very, I unfold that relationship on a daily basis. I write letters back and forth, to spirit, and go into sitting in with spirit. And so I feel like, yeah, it's only really in my 40s that I've been able to kind of find a spirituality that feels authentic and is really practical in my life. It's not like this belief system that's like hovering up here. It's like it's here, and it's woven through my day. And I guess I would say, like, what really led to that was having a huge, I'm still looking for language to describe this, because like nothing feels quite right. But during the early pandemic in June of 2020, and I was also going through the perimenopause, which had started earlier, but really kind of reached a pitch at that point. Um, I had a very sort of traumatic thing happen in the arena of work in June of 2020, and just found myself going into the most altered state I had ever experienced without using any kind of substance. Like, I remember the date. I mean, it's that powerful. I don't know if this has been the case with other people that you've interviewed, Katie, but if they like remember the date of a spiritual emergence event.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because I'm always like June 17th, 2020. Like, I will never forget this date as long as I live. Like, and I woke up that day and was aware of this other presence residing within my body. Like, I even as I say that now, I'm like, I know how I want to apologize for it. Like, I know how out there that sounds. Like, there's still that part of me that's like, you
Mm.
can't talk about this, people won't get it. But I know your audience will get it. And
Yeah,
there's,
but
been
that part is protecting you, right? It's that part of you is valid because there's so many years where you would not have been safe to say that. So,
for
yeah,
sure, for
absolutely.
sure. Yeah, and I think like people looking at it from the outside, would have said, "Oh, this person is psychotic." Like,
Mhm.
like, no question. They would have talked to me for 3 minutes and said, "This person's psychotic." And in fact, when I have talked about it to professionals, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're psychotic." And I woke
What
up
does
that
that
day.
even mean, you know?
I know, it's just because I experienced a reality that they don't get, or, it's like, yeah, it's just this reality supremacy, right? That's what I think of it as. And I woke up and there was like this really wise and loving being, also like experiencing the world through this physical form. That's the best way I can describe it. It was like, there's me and there's someone else in here. That's what I was trying to explain to people as it was happening. There's someone else here. And later, developed more of an understanding of who that someone else is, and they're still here. They're still with me. And why they came. I developed this whole kind of narrative of making meaning of it.
Yeah.
But I was just blasted to like new levels of connection
Mm.
with spirit that I had never known. I had never known. And this being inside like remade me. And they even have a name. They gave themselves a name, which is Shachar. and that's Hebrew for sunrise. And it's like it's a gender neutral name, and this being also like, so I don't, where I come from, gender is not a thing. Like,
Mhm.
and so yeah, like the birth of this, of Shachar inside, within me, like joining me, taking the wheel. I mean, that's literally what I was told. And
Oh,
it wasn't a possession. Like, I think people think of it like, might think, oh, this is possession, and it's not possession in the way I understand possession,
mhm.
which is usually there's a non-consensual aspect to it, and this felt consensual. It didn't feel like someone was like invading my body and my consciousness. It felt like, oh, here's a helper.
Mm,
Here's a helper to kind of help me get through this
mm,
time that I'm living in, and just all of the unraveling that was happening, like in my country and in the culture, and all of this grief. And
mm,
so it was just such a time of unraveling, and I, was very lucky in that, I have a wonderful co-parent. He was able to take my son, who was a teenager at the time, and I was definitely, I needed space from things like parenting and like day to day. I was not really fully in this dimension for a while. And I
how long
was,
did that last then? How long did that last? Sorry, I'm just yeah.
yeah, that I would say the most intense part of it lasted through the whole summer, and
Mm,
then things shifted in September. But the intensity kind of waned a little bit. I was able to resume like parenting, and um managed to navigate a lot of things that summer, despite everything that was going on, which is also like, I was able to have sort of one foot in this world and one foot in the other, and kind of like navigate. um but yeah, I had people who could help sort of take over some of my duties and responsibilities in the world. And I was lucky that I had gotten fired from a job, and I was out of work essentially. I couldn't work anyway. I had to like let go of all of the work that I had, and that, like, financially I was able to survive that summer, not working. And then I had friends who, at one point I really thought I was going to be hospitalized.
mm,
And I had friends who were like, "No, we're gonna support you," and kind of create like a respite.
wow.
One particular friend helped create a little respite for me when I was going through the worst
Mm,
aspects of it. Um, and then, yeah, I was able to get through without being hospitalized. Oh, I had another friend in the Hearing Voices network who talked to me and helped me figure things out, like around sleep, because I had not been sleeping for, it felt like, years up until that point. Yeah, how to just kind of get some basic needs handled so that I could function on this planet, and not end up in the hospital. So, it's because I already knew about all of these resources that I'm so thankful I was able to reach out and like avail myself of them when I needed them. And but it was so exhilarating, and it could also be really quite terrible at times, going through this experience, of like integrating this new presence that I felt. um, and yeah, I mean, there was at the time this incredible peer support network that for people in spiritual emergence, I think it doesn't exist anymore. But if that had not existed when I was going through my thing, I really I don't know where I would be, because I was able to reach out to those folks and like verbalize the things going on, and that
mm,
was incredible. I wish we could all like restart something like that,
mm.
because
Yeah,
it was so amazing. It's like, and so it was my peers who got me through, like, just this totally altered state, where if I had said anything to anyone outside of that, I would have immediately gotten locked up, and
mm.
they kept me from being locked up, and I'll be forever, forever grateful for that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Leah. I mean, so I've just finished a piece of research, and this is my absolute passion, is to kind of, yeah, I mean, the spiritual emergence networks are still going, but there's online support, there's email support, there's not like not in the UK, I don't know about other countries, but a physical body of people that can actually go and hold someone who is going through the process. And my research, I mean, so much of what you've said, you know, people were diagnosed with psychosis, but framed it as a spiritual emergence for want, like you say, for want of a better word. I founded the network, and I don't even the international network, and I don't even like that term anymore. I don't think it encapsulates it mm, that well, because like you say, it's very loaded, the word spiritual anyway. But yeah, this I said to people, what did you need? What did you ideally need at the time? And every single person said a peer support network, people to hold me in nature, feed me, made sure I slept, validated me, tell me I'm not crazy, and just help me make sense of what the hell is going on. And it's like that. But I think this brings us to, so I'm having conversations now. I've just become a board member of Soteria, who kind of provide alternative crisis houses, and we're having
Amazing.
conversations around, okay, what training do people need to hold people
Mhm.
in these states? And a lot of conversations around being embodied and being aware of our own responses, right? Because we have to be in a regulated nervous system to attune to someone else to hold space for that, because it's a bloody deep space, right?
It is. I mean, I kind of look at it in similar to people who are taking part in like psychedelic ceremonies, but they are more of the guide. They're not actually ingesting any medicines. But they're like, yeah, it's I feel like it's similar skills. It's
Yeah.
like just being able to roll with a person's reality and like not, be in a fixing mode and just yeah, I feel like there's so many commonalities there. Um and yeah, and right, like being able to just even if we don't understand the experience, being able to validate the emotions behind it, being able to validate like yeah, how real this is for this person, even if it like makes absolutely no sense to us. And being able to hold that complexity of multiple realities, which most people really struggle with.
Yeah,
It's that
exactly.
reality supremacy thing.
Reality supremacy, I love that. Yeah, because it really does trigger those like fear responses, doesn't it? Because of our cultural narrative. We're not, this is not the norm. But I love what you said, Leah, because I've thought about that a lot myself. Like actually the commonalities with someone who's on a psychedelic trip and what they need. But actually, I guess what's happening for them is there's no shame, because they've taken something and they're supposed to be experiencing this weird shit, right? Whereas someone that has just had this experience initiated, catalyzed through trauma or whatever it is that has catalyzed it, it's like, oh, well, that automatically brings this shame response, because it's like, oh, I'm experiencing something that is beyond the norm, and I shouldn't be
Mhm.
experiencing this. And I think
And
that,
confusion.
yeah,
Yeah, it's like the level of confusion is just indescribable. Like, what on earth is happening?
mm.
Like, what is real? Like, I don't even know anymore, and that's a really scary thing.
Do you know, so you said that you were going through a really tricky, like challenging work situation at the time when that happened. Was there anything in particular that like catalyzed that for you looking back?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. People look back on the early pandemic and talk about developing new hobbies and having time and things like that. That was not my experience of it.
You're
I
like,
was
"I'm gonna walk
working.
in."
Yeah, it was just like I was working more than ever, and I was covering very traumatic stuff like the rapid spread of COVID and psychiatric facilities and just the neglect and the eugenics that's, inherent in that kind of thing. So I was just writing about really hard and painful things, and then what was happening in the collective was so scary and confusing, with the, killings of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and just all of that was like rising to the surface culturally. And like the earthquakes that were resulting from that. I just feel like it was like, within me, it was outside of me, it was just, um,
Mm.
yeah, it was just all consuming. And yeah, there is this shame at sort of cracking,
Yeah.
quote unquote, but
Mm.
also just utter confusion, like not knowing what is real and having to kind of come to terms with that. Cause I'd experienced some altered states in my lifetime, but one was brought on by a substance. So then when I stopped using that substance, all of that content went away. But I've never had like an extended period of,
Mm.
straddling realities and like just being able to be with people who get what that is and what that means without having to explain it, or translate it, is just it's priceless. It's so, so valuable.
Yeah, that is incredible that you managed to navigate that for such a long time without being hospitalized. Like, wow, wow. And yeah, I mean,
I had a lot of help. I had a ton of help and a lot of privilege that helped with that too.
I might tell,
Being able to not work. I mean, what if I had to work I wouldn't have been able to work.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that would have made things worse, and I know I would have ended up hospitalized, but just the fact that I could get by, that makes such a huge difference too. Just having basic material needs met as you're going through this is can't be underestimated, that, the power of that.
that's so important, isn't it? That the context of where we experience a breakdown and what that then leads to. Yeah, so important. I'm really aware of the time. I could speak to you for for hours, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
and we can go a little bit over too. It's not, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I really want to find out more about your, yeah, like, so, okay, so that was also, you said that there were a lot of hormone changes going on for you as well around this time, and how that kind of has led you to doing this new, what is it called, your menopause project?
Menopause Solidarity Network.
Oh, solidarity. Nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, listen, I've been a mental health advocate, for a long time, and I had never heard anything about perimenopause, menopause, like what could happen to mental health at that period of life, like literally nothing from anybody. Like maybe they were talking about it and I wasn't listening, but I doubt it. And so I just knew like things were really starting to go downhill for me very quickly. And I dimly was aware that maybe perimenopause had something to do with it, but didn't really fully grasp that until I was quite a ways into it. Um, so it was the not sleeping, cognitive changes. I mean, that's really where it began.
Right.
Cognitive changes that got worse and worse until I literally could not do my job anymore. And that was before I had had a full-time job and
Mm,
I had to resign. I went on medical leave and I resigned, because I could not cognitively
mm,
navigate the load of a full-time job. Like it just I had survived my whole life by writing and speaking, and those skills I felt like were crumbling. I couldn't
mm,
end a thought. I couldn't put a sentence together. I kept losing my train of thought like constantly. I mean, we all do that. I mean, it's like no, there's no shame in it, but it's like when I'm like making my living from writing and speaking, there was a lot of fear there. Like, how the fuck am I gonna survive if these skills are deteriorating?
mm,
Um, and then, yeah, so the sleeping, the cognitive stuff, and then the severe, severe suicidal, not wanting to be here kicked in. Like that was the next phase of it. So that takes us into like fall of 2020.
mm,
And then that went on for quite a while, and so all this time I'm trying to figure out what the hell is happening. Like my life is relatively okay. Like there's nothing that bad happening, but I just cannot stop thinking about suicide. Like it's just,
mm,
and so and then there was that huge altered state as well. And so I just cast about and like tried herbs and just tried all these different things, learning about menopause, this like crash course with it, and coming to understand that, having a trauma history, definitely is correlated with having some pretty severe mental health stuff going on in menopause. I remember my therapist saying, "Yeah, there's all these like midlife women who are these like hard driving, like high achieving trauma survivors in my practice, and they're like all falling apart." And I'm just like, "What is happening? What is going on?" And
Mm.
so trauma has a correlation with mental health issues in menopause. Just yeah, there's so much that I didn't know. I didn't know that the second highest incidence of quote, what gets labeled as psychosis
Mhm.
is we know about the young people, the age 19 to whatever, but there's a second incident, like a peak in psychosis, what was called psychosis in the menopausal transition.
Okay, I didn't
Yeah,
know.
and no, but there's nobody knows about this. There's literally like no practically no services or supports for people like me who went through that.
Mhm.
And nobody's even really talking about it. So all of this stuff is like blasting my mind open as I'm like, "Oh my goodness, like yeah, this is so important for people to know, not to like be in a fear mongering place, but like to know, like if I have a trauma history, certain autoimmune disorders can cause a more challenging menopause, which is also, correlated with trauma. So, just knowing like, hey, this could be happening for me in my like early to mid 40s, and trauma does also it can result in like menopause coming on earlier or that perimenopause starting earlier. And so many people don't realize like the mental health stuff is yes, of course there's like it's very complicated, but what's happening is when people are going to their doctors in menopause saying I'm having this and that going on, there's gonna be like they just throw them an antidepressant prescription. Right? It's called diagnostic overshadowing, or they put them on a bunch of antipsychotics. I mean, it's a known phenomenon that
Mhm.
people are not taken seriously, and the whole person is not addressed.
Mm.
Right? It's, like, treated as just a mental health issue or, it's just people aren't being taken seriously when they're going into their doctors, and that, for me, like, awakened all of this psychiatric trauma because, like, I'd had very bad experiences in the medical system trying to be heard and understood. And
Mm.
to, like, go through that again, like, 25, 30 years later, it was, like, insult on top of injury because like, I'm suffering, I feel really fucked up, and I don't know what to do, and none of you are taking this seriously, or they're saying, "Oh, you're too young," or, "The blood test says you don't have it," like, "No, no, no, you're not in menopause yet." Just being invalidated at every turn, I was like, "Damn it, I do not want anyone else to have to go through this bullshit." And it took me 4 years to be able to get hormones.
Right.
4
Wow.
years to be able to get my own hormones. They wanted to put me on mood stabilizers, and I was taking herbs. I mean, herbs are great, but, like, I needed my own hormones,
Mm.
you know? And I'm not saying this is, like, the magic bullet for everyone or one size fits all, but I got on hormones last year,
Mhm.
and I feel like yeah, I'm not trying to get back to some old self I once was, but I'm feeling okay in my skin as I am now. And it took years of and all it really I just needed my own hormones, like and things have not been it doesn't make everything perfect.
Mhm.
I lose my train of thought all the time still, but it has made an enormous world of difference. And
Mm.
it's so patriarchal and messed up that it's so hard for us to get our own hormones if that's what we want, you know? So that's like another soapbox that I could go off on. But it's like, so yeah, it's navigating all the disruption that can happen, like real like life upheaval. For some of us, it is not subtle.
Mhm.
And it's not just about hot flashes. Like
Mm.
if it was just hot flashes, I wouldn't even care, like, I'll be sweaty and hot for 5 minutes, you know? It was so much deeper than that.
Mhm.
So that really just drives my passion to, like, I wanna create the thing that I really wanted, as I said earlier, and had to, like, cobble together, and I also really wanna support people in, like, medical encounters,
Right.
like, how to not be gaslit and ignored, how to, like, access what you need, how to advocate and access what you need, who to go to, and how to cut through that 4 years of hell that I went through. So that's what I wanna do.
Wow. God, I'm so sorry that you experienced that. but also, you know, is that also did you experience that because you're meant to be doing this, right? I
Mhm.
just want to go back because I'd love to know your thoughts because I've thought a little bit about this actually in terms of the you know, capitalism, patriarchy and all of that. Like, so we are disconnect. It's almost like, I don't know what your thoughts on this, but from a like a meta perspective, we're forced into connection with our bodies, right? When we go through this. And we're so forced to disconnect from our bodies from when we start to bleed. You know, it's like you see the adverts, you know, take a painkiller, pharmaceuticals will support you, put your
Mhm.
rollerblades on, dance your way to work and just get on with it, you know. And
And the
we,
same with menopause, there's a whole industry about that now. Yeah.
yeah, like numb it down, keep numbing it down. But actually, is the correlation of like people who have been through trauma and experiencing this stuff, yeah, possibly, you know, obviously there's a correlation there, but is it also because we are also more open and sensitive and part of this evolutionary shift to, you know, speak out about the impacts of capitalism and the patriarchal ways of being? Because I don't know about you, and maybe it's just that's my coping mechanism, but I like to kind of look at the meta perspective on this. It's like, yeah, this is what it's about. Um, it's not the fact that they're like we're individually having these problems. We're just all this collective voice of change, you know, because it's like, you know, we need to go back again to the indigenous wisdoms, you know, where it's like it's a sacred thing. They bleed into the earth and it's like revered because women's bodies are amazing and you know. But in the West, it's like, no, you've just got to forget about it all and get on with it. So
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, and the experience of menopause, you named it so beautifully. It's not it's not a universal experience. It's conditioned by the societies that we live in and the attitudes towards the female body and aging, or I don't even want to say the female body, people who bleed, you know, and aging and all of that, right? The views in our very patriarchal, you know, white supremacist, you know, colonized culture,
mm,
capitalist, all of those things,
mhm,
right? That we are seen to lose value, become invisible, you know, when we hit a certain age and can no longer theoretically reproduce. Right, that sense of loss of value. I mean, that's a really big piece in this. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's Palestinian, and she said it's translated in Arabic as the age of despair. From Arabic, it's Sinat al-Yas, which in English is the age of despair. And it's like, I was like, where I wonder where that came from, because I feel like that might have come from like some Western translation, because like it's just,
from
yeah,
Western folk, that's where it
it
came
just it
from.
feels like such a very, like, a Western conception. So I mean, you know, I don't know the answer to that, but, I'm gonna look into it. But yeah, it is so conditioned, right, on that. And that also shows, like, there's research to show that, women of color may enter perimenopause earlier, may have, you know, like, a rough time with it. Like, right, that very much has to do with that, history of, you know, surviving and living through our racist, you know, culture, misogynistic, misogynoir. Um, so yeah, I think it's so important. I don't ever want to talk about menopause in isolation as this thing that happens to individuals, which is why I came up with this name Menopause Solidarity, because it's like, yeah, this is collectively. See, something else that people talk about in menopause too is like this rage that they can't control. Like
Mm.
all the years of us like masking and like being
Pushing it
trying to look
down, yeah.
good and like, you know, just like doing what we have to do to survive.
Mhm,
Like, I found I couldn't control my rage, and I didn't like that because it hurt it hurt some people that I didn't wanna hurt, you know?
mhm,
But it also hurt some people I didn't wanna hurt, but yeah, it's but it's right, it's like learning how to take that upsurge of rage and, like, channel it in a way that's, like, really for our collective liberation.
Power
I think
again.
that's a big task of menopause. It's like it's for many of us, it's an initiation into elderhood and
Yeah.
like how to be in our power, right, as elders, in this burning world.
Yeah. Oh God, I love that. I can so relate to that. I'm navigating that at the moment myself. So yeah, yeah. And yeah, it's how we use that rage, isn't it? Because there's righteous rage as well. There's valid rage, and I think, yeah, if we've silenced ourselves for all of our lives, it's like actually um yeah, using that in an ethical way is good. And I think that needs reframing, you know. Yeah, these kind of older angry women, it's like actually no, women are stepping into our power and that's what the world needs. So yeah, thank you for
Mhm.
embracing and alchemizing your power to help the world, Leah.
Oh, well, right back at you, Katie. We've got the same big picture goal going on, same life purpose, I think, and just going about it in our unique ways. But yeah,
Yeah, and that's the key. I loved what you said before around like finding our peace and actually staying in that balance of like, oh yeah, I don't need to save the world. I just need to do my little bit is kind of huge relief. I remember, I was pretty ungrounded and the whole, initial like, oh, I'm important and I've got this mission to do. And it's like, actually, no, like now. And it's like, it still is, but it's like, it's just a tiny, tiny molecule of the whole picture. And that's such a relief, isn't it? When you find out like, oh yeah, I can actually take some time to like care for myself and walk in the woods and be in my body. And it is so necessary. Um,
yeah, it's critical if we want to be sustainable.
yeah.
I want to be sustainable across all the days I have on this earth. And in the past, I just kind of got caught up in this like boom and I would go, 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 crash, go, 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 crash, and it's like that's not serving anyone or anything. Like that's just old conditioning and patterning that I'm working to unlearn.
And I think it's part of the journey as well, isn't it? It's like, oh, I've got a job to do. And actually, I know for me, I don't know about for you, but it was a coping mechanism. Keep busy, keep busy. That keeps me in my head. So I'm not in my body actually, because maybe there's some more stuff in there that I need to, I'm avoiding facing. So
Totally.
yeah. And then, like you say, when you hit menopause and you're kind of, you're in your body, it's like there's no escaping it. It's all gonna come up. So yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's like if we just know to like we're not going to know exactly what it's going to look like, but I
Mm,
really want people to go in feeling more prepared and more empowered for whatever it looks like for them, and that's what I feel really excited about trying to push some of that work out in the world.
me too. And it's like, I guess it's like the spiritual emergence framework, isn't it? If you're creating this framework of like giving people a new narrative or a new safety. I kind of see it as a safety net. It's like if they know there's a safety net there, that they can find their own place in it or on it, or like whatever's in that net is whatever works for them, then at least there's a net there, so yeah, knowing there's this framework is so important. So have you got a website for that yet,
I
Leah?
am working on it right now, but I believe it will be menopausesolidarity.net. That's what I got the URL. So I like the .net because it's about that network, you know.
Cool.
So
Yeah.
I think that's what it's going to be. But yeah, hopefully the website will be launched by the end of the summer, early fall. I'm working on it right now and kind of just putting the vision together, and it's been really delicious work. Very excited.
Amazing. Well, thank you for everything you're doing and your time coming back to share. It's so lovely to reconnect.
It is. I wish we could just turn around and like I could interview you now because I want to hear everything else. But maybe another time we could just this chat because, like, I wanted to ask you all of those questions back.
Oh, yeah, well, I think, I shared quite a lot anyway, so
You
yeah,
did. You
echo
did,
it.
for
No, I
sure.
think, yeah, it's so lovely to reconnect with my network again because I think however long has passed, it's like, "Oh, yeah, here we are," "There you are again."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we're just 7 years older.
I know, it's
Why
bonkers.
though, right?
Yes. Are you still in the UK?
Mhm.
Oh, you are? Okay. My son is going to Ireland next year, and
Okay.
I'm thinking of going to visit him. He's spending a semester in Ireland and visiting him and kind of
Oh.
doing a nice long trip throughout, Ireland, Scotland, Great Britain.
Oh, well, it's a good job he's not here right now. We've got work.
Oh, I know. It's horrific.
I know.
Horrific what's happening. Where exactly are you? Because I know it's happening all over the country.
Really not proud to be British right now.
Well, that's
I'm
how I feel about America, so
I'm in Norfolk on the East Coast, so
okay. I mean, it seems like they've been happening, these riots, like, all over the country. I was looking at a map.
so frightening. Like we're literally seeing the polarization, aren't we, of humanity at the moment. So yeah, yeah,
Mm.
talk about straddling.
Yes, right. It's like keeping that groundedness even in the midst of everything, like how the earth is convulsing right now. It's no joke. It's truly no joke.
Really no joke, is it? A friend of mine actually used the metaphor. I don't know if you remember, I don't know if they had them in the US. We used to have it these really scary. I mean, you look back now and I think there was no health and safety. They were called gravity wheels at the fun fair, where
Yeah,
you just like pinned to the wall because it was
totally.
fast. It's like the earth is doing that and we have to literally lay flat on the earth.
That is the best visual and metaphor. Yes, that's exactly it. I've also likened it to, like, those drop tower,
Mhm.
where you go into free fall and then it, like, stops.
Oh,
You know? And then you go to free fall again and it's, that's it kind of feels like that to me too. It's like
you lose your organs for a
it's
while.
like this crumbling that's just happening. Like it's
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just gotta happen, right? We know it's got to happen, so it's even more of solidarity and holding hands whilst we're in free fall, right?
100%. I mean, anyone who like signed up to be on the planet right now has signed up for some serious shit. So yeah, we gotta just all we just gotta like link arms through that, you know?
I know,
Yeah, it's
I know.
woo.
Anyway, so lovely to have you back, Leah, and let me know where people can keep in touch, find out about, when your book's out and when your Menopause Solidarity is out. I will put the website link below if you're happy for me to share that or
Yeah, right now I just have my kind of my writer's website that kind of gives you updates on what I'm doing and what I'm publishing. And that's LeahHarris.com. So that's LeahIHarris.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at LeAH.IDA. And yeah, I think that's probably the best ways to keep up with what I'm doing. Yeah, we'll
oh,
leave it there.
brilliant. Thank you, Leah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Katie.
Mm,
Take
bye.
care. Thanks for having me. Bye.